Every morning, the city woke like a reluctant giant. Its breath came in the form of steam from manhole covers. Its voice, the rustle of newspapers, a steady murmur of greetings half muttered at groggy cafe counters. Doors slammed, boots tapped hollow on concrete. Somewhere in the chaos, the underbelly of the city stirred. Just a few hundred feet below, trains sighed to a halt. The rails, glittering only in places the light touched them, buzzed like the city's own heartbeat. The air was damp, with the scent of rust, warm bodies, and forgotten coffee. People flowed in, like water through a colander, pausing at platforms, disappearing into tunnels. And in the middle of all this, on the uptown platform of Line 7, there was a cat. Small, orange, and composed, as if she had no business in the suburbs of ordinary feline life. She sat with perfect posture on the black and white tiles, watching the approach of the train with something that felt like recognition. Her eyes weren't frantic, weren't wandering. She blinked as the train slowed to its stop, issuing its pneumatic breath. The people gathered were mostly too tired to notice her. Mostly, one woman did. Maybe it was because she was always watching. Those who carry invisible griefs tend to see what others miss. She stood a few feet away, latte in hand, her expression unreadable, as the little cat rose and padded forward, tail high, and hopped onto the train between two large boots. She waited until the car doors slid shut. Then she disappeared inside. That was the first time Maya saw her. Not most people's idea of a miracle, maybe, but loss teaches you to recognize the extraordinary in quieter shades. She didn't think of it as strange, not at first. Maybe the cat had wandered on, slipped through in the crowd. Someone's pet, chased from a leash perhaps. But 3 days later, there she was again. Same time, same platform, same self-contained grace. By now, Maya had started to look for her, half embarrassedly, as though she might confess to someone that she'd come for a cat. But no one was looking at each other nowadays. Everyone was earbud deep in their morning playlist, heads bowed under the weight of their thoughts. The cat was easy to miss, but for those who noticed, she was magnetic, not quite belonging, not quite out of place, because she acted like she had every right to be there. She didn't meow, she didn't beg, she didn't rub herself against pant legs or dart under benches. She simply sat, waited for the train, climbed aboard, as if it was always her train. And it wasn't just twice, it was every day. Line 7, 8 to 12 a.m., uptown, as though she had an appointment. By the end of the week, someone snapped a blurry picture. A gray-tiled platform, a yellow line faint beneath scuffed paws, and one curious, almost smug-looking tabby, peering out from under a plastic bench. By the weekend, it was a post. Then it was a thread. Then a story. "Have you seen this cat?" The caption read, "I swear she's commuting." Thousands of likes, hundreds of shares. No collar, no name. Just a feline slipping between lives, threading herself through the mechanical rhythm of the city as easily as a breeze moves through alleys. The subway cat. Some brushed it off, called it a photoshopped lark. Others wondered aloud in coffee shop queues, half hoping they'd glimpse her one morning themselves. But for the few who saw her in person, something subtly unspoken emerged. A feeling, not wonder really, something softer, like remembering something tender from childhood. A ball of string left at the bottom of a drawer, a button from a lost coat. What was she doing? Where was she going? And Most curiously, how did she seem to know when to get off? By all appearances, she was calm, purposeful, well-practiced. A routine, a ritual. Some commuters made jokes. She's got better train manners than half the city. Someone else tweeted, if this cat's riding the subway daily, should we start paying her a stipend? Employee of the month. But even humor admitted something deeper. This wasn't random. She was not lost. She was following something. And slowly, across posts and reposts and lunchtime conversations, one question echoed loudest, carried in the clatter of wheels over rails and the huff of receding engines. Who is this cat? And why? Is she riding the subway alone? Maya first noticed her again on a Tuesday. It was raining. Not the poetic kind, but a damp, sideways drizzle that turns the pavement slick and makes people tuck into themselves. Maya had been late getting out the door, late getting her coffee, and still early enough to feel like she shouldn't bother showing up at all. Her umbrella had collapsed somewhere between her stoop and the station entrance. She'd stood on the platform, shivering slightly beneath a soaked scarf, and there, at the far end, was the cat. Same faint smudge of orange, same dignified posture, a lone ember left burning at the edge of a gray world. Maya felt her breath catch. She wasn't sure why. The cat sat unbothered by the rain, perfectly dry beneath the overhang, composed as always, as though she'd appeared fully formed from the seams in the city itself. Maya blinked. A part of her thought she might only imagine the cat when she needed to. But no, she was real, solid, consistent in a way little else was. That morning, the subway stuttered onto the tracks with a faint shriek of brakes. Commuters pressed forward like weary-tide. Maya stayed where she was. The cat rose silently, tail unfurling like a silken ribbon, and leapt aboard. Not at Maya's car, but one down. She vanished again between shoulders and business pants and two full bags. Maya stood there for several seconds after the doors hissed closed. By Thursday, she'd stopped pretending she wasn't waiting for her. She even arrived at the station 10 minutes early, latte in hand, standing near the pillar where the cat seemed to prefer sitting. It was embarrassing if she thought about it too long. A grown woman showing up early to spot a cat when she could barely bother to eat something besides crackers the night before. But it gave her something, a tiny piece of rhythm, one rusted bead on an old rosary. That morning, the cat appeared right on schedule, 8th stripe from the stairwell, tail wrapped neatly around her toes. Maya lowered herself to a crouch, a respectful few feet away, pretending to examine her phone. The cat flicked an ear, but didn't move. Up close, her markings were more distinct, mottled with tiny whorls of cream and cinnamon, a faint scar over one eye that didn't look recent. She blinked slowly, once at Maya. Then the train arrived. She moved, effortless, the way dancers in old black and white films used to move. A full week passed this way, Maya watching, cat appearing, boarding, disappearing, and still no caller, no sign of a human companion. Maya began to feel a strange sense of responsibility, as though noticing her meant she had signed an invisible contract. One morning, she snapped a picture. It wasn't remarkable, a tail just disappearing through the gap in subway doors. But her hands trembled after she took it. She almost didn't post it, but late that night, cradled in the hollow of an unending quiet, she typed a caption. Notice this cat's riding my train every. Morning. Alone. Same car. Same stop. What's her story? More replies than she expected. Some joked. Some shared blurry pictures of their own, insisting they too had seen her across different stations, but always during similar hours. This the blurry girl from Union? Someone asked. Another wrote, she passed me on Carroll Street, ignored me completely, like I wasn't even there, Queen. Soon, a few local blogs picked it up. Subway cat spurs, online fascination. One headline read, another called her the mystery commuter. The more romantically inclined dubbed her Suki, after a character in an old manga. The name stuck. Maya didn't mind. It felt right. Suki. People began to leave out tuna near the benches. Not too much. Just enough to say, we see you. Conductors started nodding when they spotted her, shaking their heads in bemused wonder. One driver claimed she sat beside him once on the operator bench, cool as you please, before hopping off at Smith Avenue. Among the transit staff, there were debates. Lost pet? Street smart stray? Time-traveling witches familiar? But everyone agreed on one thing. She belonged. Suki somehow belonged because she didn't act afraid, didn't cower or cling to shadows. She rode with the self-possession of a lifelong commuter, just another citizen of the underground. And like many citizens of the city, she began gathering stories. One morning, a toddler, passing with his tired-looking dad, pointed and laughed. Kitty goes to school too. Another time, a man in scrubs spotted her on the bench and whispered, nice to see you again, girl, as though she were a fellow night shifter finishing a long shift. Maya started seeing her as more than a curiosity. Suki became an anchor. When anxiety wrapped tight around Maya's ribs, there Suki sat, calm, serene, whole. A reminder that some things didn't need fixing or explaining. Some things just were. People started making time to find her, pausing their rush, pulling earbuds free, sipping slower from their lattes. She became a pause button, a reason to stand still. And in a city that never did, that felt like its own kind of miracle. It began with a question that wouldn't go away. Not in the cafes or on message boards. Not during hushed morning commutes or over wine at end-of-day dinners. And certainly not in the back offices of the city's transit authority. Where did she get on? More importantly, how did she know where to get off? The picture of her had become a kind of sigil. People reposted it without captions now, as though the image spoke for itself. The blur of motion just behind her, implying perfectly timed steps. A little flame darting from one station to another. Always between 2 points. Always with the certainty of a pendulum swing. One transit employee, Curtis, assistant supervisor and night shift puzzle fan, decided to quietly find out. He started reviewing footage. 3 weeks worth of archived subway surveillance from Line 7. Thousands of hours logged through dull gray tapes and wide-angle shots. But there she was. Always the same pattern. She'd emerge from the west stairwell at Halliday Station sometime between 8:06 and 8:11 each morning, never rushing. Her movements were slow, unhurried. She'd pause before crossing the yellow line, glancing both directions like a human commuter might. Then, with a flick of her tail, she'd board the second or third car of the train, sometimes second, sometimes third. Curtis raised an eyebrow. That kind of timing didn't just happen. Switching the feed to subsequent stations, he confirmed what regulars already suspected. She exited at Rosemont, 3 stops east. Not once did she hesitate or pause, as if unsure. She stepped off like she'd lived those tiles for years. She never traveled during peak times, which made sense, he thought. Cats don't like noise. She missed the 7:55 by a hair each time, and she left just before the 8:30 train arrived full of school kids and exhausted parents. When Curtis submitted the informal report, his supervisor stared at him over the rim of his coffee and said flatly, "We're not making a policy for a cat." Curtis nodded. Of course not. But still. They all began noticing her. More after that. Drivers noted the stops she favored. Operators chuckled when she trotted along empty cars en route to some unseen destination. No one tried to remove her. A few employees even hoped to catch a glimpse of her, like a lucky penny flickering just out of reach. Customers started creating homemade maps, sticking red push pins between Halliday and Rosemont, calling it Suki's line. Theories flourished. "She's visiting someone," one said. "Probably knows where the good scraps are," said another. "My grandma used to say cats follow spirits," came a quieter voice, lost among the louder explanations. Some tried to follow her, not aggressively, just a step behind. She always slipped away. At Rosemont, she'd vanish up the side stairs, dart through the chain link fence near the end of the block, and eventually disappear behind the alley next to the Korean. Grocery store. One woman claimed she climbed a fire escape and perched atop a rusted air conditioner before disappearing behind a chimney. But no one ever saw her come out the other side. A local teenager sketched his interpretation of it. Suki leaping from rooftop to rooftop, tail aglow, guiding the lost across the city's steel bones. The drawing went viral. Soon she had hashtags. Line 7 Mystery, Traincat Chronicles, Etsy had pins. TikTok had fan edits with soft piano music. Someone made a pixel animation where she blinked as trains passed behind her. A podcast interviewed 7 guests over the course of 3 episodes, trying to solve her. None did, and that was part of the point. Suki was unfixable, untamable, a quiet rebellion against the idea that everything had to be understood. Transit officials called a meeting. There was talk of catching her, rehoming. For safety, someone said. A train's no place for a cat. But the passengers had already spoken. She's never in the way. She makes my kids smile. She's been doing it long enough. Maybe she knows what she's doing. Eventually, the final decision was this. Let her be. She wasn't hurting anyone. She wasn't disrupting schedules or scaring passengers. She was, if anything, improving morale, more than the last ad campaign ever had. A small printed notice was quietly taped up behind the employee break room. Cat ID, Suki. Status, unofficial commuter. Do not detain. And so she continued, past the scrolling ads and grumbling wheels, past the glance of 1,000 passing passengers who half thought they were dreaming. Suki, the subway cat, soft-footed ghost of the underground, with no collar, no registration, but full license to commute. The letter was handwritten, in careful, wobbly script, on a page torn from a yellow legal pad. It arrived at the Transit Authority's office, folded into an envelope that smelled faintly of liniment and lavender. It didn't demand anything. It wasn't angry or urgent. It was barely even certain of itself. To whom it may concern, it began, then paused, or rather, to whomever it is who looks after the cat that rides Line 7. The letter continued, in quiet, tentative strokes. I saw a photo of her in the paper. She rides from Halliday Station. She has a white tip on her tail and a patch over one eye, like a little pirate. I think she used to be my cat. It was signed simply Walter. When they called the number, he scribbled at the bottom. The voice that answered trembled slightly, but not from fear. "She's still alive?" he asked, more to himself than to the dispatcher, like he'd only dared to half hope. A few days later, Walter arrived at Central Station with a sturdy cane and his old coat, buttons mismatched and frayed at the edges. He clutched a tattered photograph, a woman in a wide-brimmed hat, beaming as she cradled a tiny orange kitten swaddled in a blue scarf. She was Clara's. "Cat," Walter said, his voice soft and distant, as though speaking from the doorway of a memory. "My wife. Clara adored her, called her Suki child." Their building was a few short blocks from Halliday Station. After Clara got sick, the two of them would ride the subway, just for the peace of it. A quiet routine, destinationless, comforting. Clara took to bringing Suki along in a wheeled pet stroller, zipping her in with a soft blanket and a spot of catnip sewn into the corner. She sat there like a queen. Walter smiled, watched the world go by. He remembered the routes they took. Not the entire city, just their little loop, from Halliday to Rosemont or Magnolia Park and back again. Clara would hum a tune, something from their youth, while Suki peered out at the passing blur like she understood every stop. Then Clara passed away. It happened in spring, when the windows were just beginning to stay open through the night. The loss was quiet and sudden. A week later, Suki slipped out through a warped screen door on the balcony. Walter searched, called shelters, pinned notices to lampposts. Eventually, he sat out front each morning with a small dish of food, kept the porch light on through the night, just in case. But months went by. "I thought she was gone," he said. The letter in the newspaper changed that. A co-worker from his veterans group had clipped the story, left it on his doorstep alongside a note. "This look like your girl?" And just like that, hope bloomed again in a fragile, trembling way. The day Walter finally saw her, really saw her, was colder than it should have been. Early fall, with a sharp wind snaking its way between buildings. He waited on the bench near the 8th stripe, clutching the old blue scarf she'd once been wrapped in. The bench creaked under his weight. His knuckles ached, but his eyes were crystal clear. Then she appeared, just as soft and sure as in the stories. Small, orange, tail up, utterly composed. She saw him immediately, but did not rush. Instead, she circled once, before stepping forward, as if evaluating not just the man, but the scent he carried, the heartbreak, the memory, the place her story had originally begun. She pressed her head against his shin, gently, deliberately. Walter didn't speak. He let the silence say everything. That night, she followed him home. No leash, no coaxing, like she'd simply decided her shift was over. In the apartment, nothing had changed. Her old blanket remained tucked into her woven basket, though long untouched. The window behind the couch was still unlatched, just in case. She sniffed each corner slowly, tail flicking like punctuation. Then she curled up on her blanket and slept through the night. Walter didn't tell anyone right away. He feared jinxing it. But in the morning, as he buttoned his coat, she stood at the door and meowed. Once, softly. He opened it. Wordlessly, she stepped out, down the stairs, and toward the station, so Walter followed. Walter stood still as the train slowed. In his hand, he held a small cloth mouse, frayed at one ear, faded blue velvet, with a few of Clara's stitches still intact. He hadn't told anyone he was going, not even the station staff, who now smiled kindly at him when they noticed his gentle, determined visits. Instead, he simply walked to the 8th stripe near the pillar, glazed in morning light, and waited. Suki arrived just past 8:10. She crossed the platform with measured steps, ears perked, tail high. Her eyes flickered to Walter, not with alarm, but something akin to recognition, memory stitched into fur and scent. He didn't speak, just offered the toy in his hand, let it dangle gently from calloused fingers. She stopped a few feet away. The space held, quiet and unbroken. Then, slowly, she moved forward, rubbed her side against his shin, not once, but twice, then sat. A breath escaped him, long and hollow, filled with every word he'd saved up for months. "Hey there," he whispered. She blinked. That night, he didn't try to carry her, didn't close the door behind her too soon. He left the hallway light on, as if to say, "You're welcome, but I understand." She slipped upstairs when the city dimmed, tail flicking behind her like a turning page. She curled once more in her old basket. The blue scarf rumpled beneath her. He sat nearby for a long time, just watching, as if afraid she might evaporate. In the following days, she stayed. She ate from her familiar dish, batted lazily at dust motes, and woke at dawn to watch the birds from behind the window. But she was not still. She paced sometimes near the door, sat beside it with her ears pivoted, listening hard to things only she could hear. Her tail twitched restlessly as the sun slid past afternoon. Walter knew the signs. On the third morning, she meowed softly, walked to the edge of the door, and looked back, once, as if asking, or promising. He didn't hesitate. He reached for his coat, picked up the cloth mouse, and followed her downstairs. This time, he opened the front door for her. She touched her nose to his hand, briefly before slipping through. He didn't trail behind. He only watched. She moved through the sidewalk quiet as mist, joined the crowd at Halliday, like a note folding into song. When the train arrived, she hopped aboard without pause. 2 hours later, she returned. Same platform, same stride. She passed by without fanfare and ascended the steps back toward home. They never discussed it. It simply became their rhythm. Each morning, Walter brewed his tea, fed her gently, and walked her to the door. Some days he joined her for the ride to Rosemont, standing in the corner of the car while she perched near the doors. Sometimes she went alone, but always, she came back. Suki was no longer a mystery. She was family, and for Walter, her wanderings no longer felt like absence, more like prayer. Neighbors learned to wave at her as she returned from her travels. The local grocer kept a small saucer of water near their stoop. Children whispered stories into each other's ears on the platform. Today she sat near the window, like she missed someone. She did, maybe, but she also carried them with her. Each morning, when the rails hummed into motion, when the city cracked open its eyes, a small orange cat rode the subway with graceful certainty. Vehicles shrieked, announcements blared, but she moved with calm, a steady paw print on the calendar pages, a gentle clock, ticking not by seconds, but presence. Walter added a small rug by the door. Her morning Matt, he called it. The cloth mouse stayed nearby, always waiting, just in case she remembered it again. But Suki had her routine. That mattered most. She belonged to the city now, but also, finally, again, to someone. And that was enough. They used to say she'd stop writing one day. Maybe when she got old. Maybe when the novelty wore off or the internet moved on. But years passed, and each morning, the cat still came. A little slower, perhaps. A touch more deliberate in her steps. But she came. Suki remained a fixture of the Line 7 landscape, more dependable than the signal lights, more comforting than the voice of the automated conductor. She didn't always ride at the exact same time anymore. Sometimes it was 7:50, sometimes closer to 9. But whenever she arrived, people noticed. She had her followers now, though none were overbearing. Polite admiration had replaced viral curiosity. A city that had no time for anything made time for her. Someone hung a tiny bulletin board beside the Halliday bench, where she often waited. People started leaving notes. "Thanks for the company this morning. My kid says hi. He drew you in crayon. Rough day. Your calm really helped." The transit authority never took the board down. They just added tiny clips to secure the papers when the wind blew hard. Maya visited less frequently than she used to. Life changed, as life does. A new job, a few neighborhoods over, had her on a different line altogether. Different stops, different mornings. But once in a while, she transferred through Halliday just to check. One crisp October morning, she spotted Suki sitting regal on the platform. Older now, her coat a little duller, the white on her muzzle a touch more pronounced, but unmistakably herself. Maya crouched beside her. No dramatic reunion, just a long moment of quiet recognition. "You kept me going once," she said. "I hope someone tells you that someday." Suki blinked once, then turned her head toward the tracks. Ears perked for the approach. Back home, Walter had added a modest wooden bench just outside his brownstone's stoop. Small, with short legs and a felt runner draped across the top. On the side, a tiny brass plaque. Read, "Suki's seat, for quiet mornings and remembered love." Neighbors sat there sometimes. Strangers too. Those who knew the story smiled. Others asked politely. The rest just felt comforted somehow. Walter had slowed his own routine. He no longer made the whole journey each day. But most mornings, he still stood by the window with his tea, watching Suki pad down the block, tail a gentle banner behind her. She always glanced back, just once, long enough to acknowledge the space between them, and the fact they'd found their way back to it. Some days she'd stay home longer, rest on the window ledge, skip a subway ride or two, but her instinct was steady, her compass unshaken, and when she rode, it wasn't spectacle anymore. It was rhythm, faith, almost. People learned from her, though they rarely said it aloud, to trust the patterns they could build, to find meaning in small habits, even on hard days, to leave a little earlier, walk a little slower, hope a little more. She was a cat, yes, but she was also something quieter, a reminder stitched into fur and motion, that even when we go alone, we are sometimes following the shape of love behind us. Even when we're quiet, we're noticed. Even when we feel lost, we're often just on our way home. And some mornings, just for a moment, when the train slows and the doors yawn open like lungs taking in the day, her tail flicks through the crowd like a silver ribbon in a gray sea. And those lucky enough to see her, they start their day just a little softer, just a little more whole.